Dina and I have been sharing thoughts about what we each received from our ancestors and what kind of ancestors we hope to be, a conversation you might want to have with your family or friends. We're going to share a few of our answers with you. My mother's mother, my grandmother, was named Anna Elizabeth. My parents named me Elizabeth after her. Grandmother was a strong and capable woman. If she had lived later, she probably would have run a large company or been a lawyer or a doctor. But she was born in 1902, so those avenues weren't readily open to her. Instead, she directed her intelligence to her family and her community. For several years when her children were young, grandmother was the leader of a Girl Scout troop for kids with cerebral palsy, a disability that made it hard for them to move or talk. You might know someone with cerebral palsy, but back in the 1930s and 40s, children with disabilities didn't go to school with other kids and didn't often have opportunities to do things like Girl Scouts. I don't have cerebral palsy, but I was born without fingers. Back in the 1950s when I was born, parents didn't know anything about babies before they were born, not even their apparent sex. So my parents were understandably shocked and scared when I was born. Of course, I don't remember any of this. But I'm told my grandmother's experience with children with disabilities helped her to be calm about this situation, and that in turn helped my parents, and of course me over the years. We moved a lot when I was a kid, but mostly we lived in New York State, and all of my grandparents lived on the West Coast. We visited them, they visited us, so they were definitely an important part of my childhood. And in between visits, grandmother was apparently thinking about what challenges I might face because of my disability and what suggestions she might offer. Apparently she worried about how I was going to shave my legs and underarms when I became a teenager, because one of the Christmas presents I received when I was maybe 14 or so was a pretty pink electric razor. Grandmother gave me the gift of her attention, even from far away, which is a way to express love. She also gave me a practical approach to solving life's problems, a sense that there's usually a way to accomplish your goal, even if it's not immediately obvious.
My grandpa Siegler, my father's father, came from a laboring family. That means they worked with their hands in the trades. Grandpa and his brothers were all in the trades, including working in the shops of the Milwaukee Railroad in Minneapolis doing the train car maintenance. Grandpa was born in 1883 and received an education through 8th grade at a German Lutheran school. After that, he was self-taught. He did a lot of reading, and he learned the electrical trade. He was working for the Northern Pacific Railroad as an electrician at the time he and Grandma were married in 1915. Grandpa was a strong believer in labor unions and was one of the men who went on strike against Northern Pacific in 1921. He was always the labor candidate when he ran for various elective offices. In 1922, he was a candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota on the Farmer Labor Party ticket. He received 222,000 votes in that race, but the Republicans won that election. When the Democratic Party merged with the farmer laborites in the early 1940s to create the DFL party, you might recognize that, my grandparents were never convinced the merger was a good idea because it moved the party toward the center and it became too conservative in their view. My grandpa ran for city commissioner 3 times where they lived in Duluth, but didn't win. Later, he ran for clerk of the district court. Even though he had been acting clerk during World War II, he didn't win. But Grandpa was good at a lot of things. Grandpa liked to tinker with things and invent things. He built a radio in the basement. He invented a TV remote before they were in existence, so that he could mute the annoying commercials on TV. Grandpa's TV remote was a little wooden box about that big with a button on top, a metal button, and then it had wires that led to the television, and the wires were taped down on the living room rug. So you could sit in your comfy chair, and he let us kids push that button. Grandpa kept a small closet of pennies, and when our family visited, my sister and I always got to choose some pennies to bring home. Arthur August Ziegler, my grandpa, gave me pennies. But more importantly, he gave me love and attention. I did not inherit his mechanical abilities, but I inherited his love and his belief in me. He died when I was 16 years old. Somewhere around 10 years later, when I was going through a rough patch, my mom told me that Grandpa always said, "Don't ever sell that Dina short," which has a little irony to it now that I think about it. But you know what he meant. I had never heard that story about my grandpa before, and it gave me confidence. So whenever I am feeling unsure of myself these days, I look at a photo of my grandpa and remember what he said about me. I can almost hear him say, in the way that we speak today, "Dina, you got this."
What kind of an ancestor do I want to be? I want to be an ancestor my grandchildren will remember. That means spending time together. My granddaughter Cloud is 13. Some of you knew her as Kaylee when she participated in the RE program here for several years. A couple years ago, she changed her name to Cloud. When Cloud was little, she and her parents lived with us, and it was easy to hang out. Then for several years, she spent Saturday nights with us, and we'd cook together, take walks in the park, play hide and seek, paint our toenails, read stories. For the last year or two, I've been taking Cloud to her horseback riding lessons every Sunday afternoon, and she uses the time in the car to share her music with me. My favorite is Lovejoy. Cloud lives in Milwaukee County, so it's not hard for us to get together. My grandson, Marshall, is only 4 months old. He and his parents live in South Carolina, so it's going to take more planning on my part to create and nurture a relationship. I spent 2 weeks in August there helping take care of him. Of course, he won't remember that, but it was precious time for me. My husband and I plan to go visit him and his parents at the end of January, and I hope I can continue to go 2 or 3 times a year, especially while he's little. I'll be drawing on the example set by my own faraway grandparents who visited often and were important people to me in childhood and beyond. I'm a quilter. I especially enjoy making baby quilts because they're a nice manageable size. I've made a baby quilt and a Christmas stocking for each of my grandchildren and for my 3 step-grandsons. I think of these as heirlooms, things that will remind them of me throughout their lives.
Well, I don't have children, so I won't have grandchildren. How will I be a good ancestor? What do I want to pass on to those younger than me? I am a keeper of objects from my parents and grandparents, including their stories of their early lives. I have one box of McFeeder's ancestral objects, that's what I call them, and one box of Siegler ancestral objects. They include old photographs and keepsakes, like the autograph book my grandma and her friends signed during their last year of high school. The custom then was to write a little verse or poem in the small book, some of which are sweet, and some a little risque, alluding to kissing their sweethearts behind the haystack. My sister and I have several of my dad's paintings and the sweaters, hats, and socks that my mother knitted for us. These are like the heirlooms that Liz mentioned. When my grandma Siegler told me stories about growing up on a farm in Iowa, I thought they sounded a lot like the Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House books. I encouraged my grandma to write down her memories of her early life. So now we have her stories that I can pass on to my niece and nephew who never met her. My dad was in a writing group during his retirement where they wrote about their lives. Those stories are called memoirs because they're about the memories. And I now have several big 3-ring binders full of his memoirs. That is where I got the story about my grandpa's work on the railroad and his various runs for political office. I want to be a good ancestor by looking back and passing on our family's stories and heirlooms. But I also want to look forward. I want to pay attention to my niece and nephew and get to know them, who they are and what's important to them today. I'm there for them as often as I can for family milestones and celebrations. And my niece and nephew know that I'm there for them if they need emotional support. I carry on my grandpa's conviction to never sell them short, to believe in them, to let them know they got this, no matter what obstacles they face in their lives. I hope that they will remember that about me, because that's how I want to be a good ancestor.
We all face difficult times during life. My grandparents raised their children during the Great Depression, and my family has faced several serious losses. I've learned that even in the face of sadness, grief, disappointment, and tragedy, life can still hold meaning, beauty, even joy. I get through hard times by allowing myself to feel my feelings. I've learned that pretending everything is fine doesn't help in the long run. I try to be patient with myself, knowing that these feelings won't last forever. I look to other people for support, family, friends, members of this community, sometimes a therapist. I listen to music, I sing. I create beauty through sewing, gardening, and crafts. Speaking of crafts, in a minute, Dina is going to tell us about a craft we can all do to honor our connection to other generations. Another way I get through difficult times is by taking in the beauty of the natural world and its cycles, the sky, the changing leaves, the birds and other animals, and reminding myself that I am a part of that world. I hope my grandchildren and other younger people who know me can learn some of this from me to help them through the hard parts of their own lives.